That night, Seoul glimmered like a restless jewel. Neon signs blazed, taxis blared their horns, and the city hummed with endless ambition. Beneath the towering skyline, Nissa Aji hurried along the narrow streets, clutching her coat against the cold. Complaining wasn't in her nature. Back home in Lagos, she'd endured far worse heat that could melt steel and traffic that could try the patience of a saint. But Seoul felt different. Here, she was invisible, just another foreign face in a crowd that barely glanced up. Still, she loved the city's rhythm, fast, loud, unapologetic. It mirrored her own spirit. By day, she was a scholarship student at the university. By night, she worked at Glass and Ember, one of the most exclusive rooftop lounges in the city. The job barely covered her rent, but it kept her close to the city's elite men in impeccably tailored suits, women who floated in designer heels, and secrets whispered between sips of cocktails. That's where she first laid eyes on him. Han Min, a man whom Seoul's underworld both feared and worshipped, a man whose very name could silence a room. He sat at the far end of the bar that evening, surrounded by men in black suits, a faint scar slicing across his jaw like a permanent warning. Everything about him exuded control, from the way he spoke to the way the air around him seemed to bow in obedience. When he raised a finger, the bartender sprinted. When he smirked, people trembled. But not Nissa. She approached him with her tray, her posture straight, her voice steady. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" Han Min didn't even look up from his phone, one hand lazily holding a lit cigarette. "Do you speak Korean?" he asked, his tone flat and devoid of emotion. "Enough to survive," she replied curtly. That made him finally look up. Finally. His dark, piercing eyes met hers, scanning her face as if trying to decipher her very soul. "A foreigner," he murmured, his lips curling slightly. "And bold, too." She didn't flinch. "Coffee or whiskey, sir?" He chuckled under his breath, more insult than amusement. "Neither. Just tell your manager not to hire women who are too distracting." Her jaw tightened. The other waiters gasped softly from across the room, sensing imminent danger. But Nissa didn't move an inch. "If I were distracting, you wouldn't still be looking." The table fell silent. One of his men shifted nervously. Han Min's expression darkened. No one ever spoke to him like that. Ever. He leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "Someone who thinks manners are optional," she fired back without hesitation. A single, dangerous second stretched between them, the kind of second that could rewrite destinies. And then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. A slow, unsettling smile. "Interesting." He dropped a thick stack of bills on the table and stood up. "Keep the change, bold girl. You'll need it when the world starts to punish that mouth of yours." He walked out with his guards, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive smoke and a tension so thick it clung to the air. The bar buzzed with whispers the moment he was gone. "Are you insane?" her manager hissed. "That's Han Min. He owns half the city." Nissa simply exhaled and muttered, "He doesn't own me." But deep down, she knew she had just crossed paths with a storm, and storms never leave quietly. 2 nights later, that storm found her again. She was locking up the cafe when a black car slid silently to a stop at the curb. The tinted window rolled down and she froze. "Han Min?" His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Get in." "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the fear that was bubbling inside her. He leaned back, smirking. "Then you'll walk home alone. In a city where accidents happen every night." The chill that ran through her spine had nothing to do with the weather. Against her better judgment, she got in. The inside of the car smelled like leather and danger. His men sat silently in the front while Han Min turned to her with that same unreadable stare. "You've got nerve, Nissa," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a dark secret. "How do you know my name?" "I make it my business to know things, especially when someone catches my attention. If this is about what I said." "It's not," he cut in smoothly. "You'll be working for me." She blinked, caught completely off guard. "Excuse me?" You're fluent in English, and I have foreign clients. I need a translator who's unafraid to speak her mind. So, you insult me, then hire me? She snapped, her anger rising. I don't hire. I choose, he said coldly. And you're chosen. Her pulse hammered in her chest. Every part of her wanted to refuse, but something in his tone, that quiet authority mixed with a hint of curiosity, pulled her in. And if I say no? He smirked again, leaning closer until his breath brushed her cheek. Then you'll regret it. Because when Han Min offers an opportunity, saying no simply isn't an option. The car stopped in front of her tiny apartment building. He didn't wait for her answer. He already knew it. As she stepped out, his voice followed her. Be ready tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late, or I'll come find you myself. The window rolled up, and the car disappeared into the night. Nissa stood there, her heart pounding, torn between fury and something dangerously close to intrigue. For the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, she wasn't just surviving. She was stepping into something far darker, deeper, and far more powerful than she'd ever imagined. And she had no idea whether it would destroy her or awaken something she'd been afraid to feel. The morning arrived cold and silver, Seoul's skyline hidden beneath a thick veil of fog. Nissa hadn't slept. Her mind replayed every word Han Min had said, every look, every warning. She told herself she'd show up just to prove she wasn't afraid, and then quit the moment she saw what kind of man he really was. But as she stood before the massive steel and glass tower with Hong Corporation carved across the front, her resolve wavered. This was no ordinary business. The building radiated power. Too clean, too quiet, too dangerous. The receptionist barely looked at her before saying, "He's expecting you. Top floor." That sentence alone sent a shiver down her spine. The elevator ride felt eternal. By the time the doors opened, the scent of expensive cologne and gun oil filled the air. 2 guards nodded as she passed, their eyes unreadable. Then she saw him. Han Min was seated behind a sleek black desk, the city skyline blazing behind him like a backdrop. His jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled up, and tattoos snaked down his forearms like whispers of sin. "You're on time," he said without looking up. "Impressive. I don't like wasting people's time," she replied, stepping closer to his desk. He finally looked at her, that same dangerous calm in his eyes. "You'll translate documents and handle communication with my foreign associates. You'll speak only when I say so. You'll go where I tell you. Understood?" "I'm not your puppet," she retorted, refusing to be intimidated. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "No, you're my employee, a temporary one, unless you want to make this permanent." Nissa folded her arms, holding his gaze. "Let's just get this over with." For the next few hours, they worked in intense silence. She translated reports, answered calls, and ignored the weight of his gaze every time she spoke. Her Korean was fluent, crisp, competent, flawless. At one point, she caught him watching her reflection in the glass wall, not with arrogance this time, but with curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then suddenly he stood up. "Come with me." "Where?" "Meeting. You'll translate." He didn't explain further, just strode out of the office, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. She followed. The car ride was silent. Outside, the city blurred into motion: bridges, towers, endless traffic. Inside, the tension thickened with every breath. Nissa stared out the window, refusing to look at him. "So, this is what you do?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "Run a company that's just a cover for something darker?" He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're observant. You're not exactly hiding it, and yet you're still here." She met his gaze, a battle of fire and ice raging between them. "Only until I get paid." He smiled faintly. "You think I won't pay you?" "I think you're used to people obeying you, not questioning you." That earned her a low chuckle. "Keep that mouth, Nissa. It might get you killed, or keep me entertained." Her pulse quickened, but she looked away before he could see. The meeting took place at an abandoned warehouse near the Han River. Polished cars were parked outside, and men in suits stood guard. Inside, the air smelled of metal and danger. Han Min's clients were clearly no ordinary businessmen. Sharp eyes, colder smiles, foreign accents laced with greed. He motioned for Nissa to sit beside him. As the talks began, she realized her role was more critical than she'd thought. He trusted her to translate deals worth millions, possibly lives. Every word mattered. Every glance had meaning. At one point, a tall Russian man leaned toward her, smirking. "Pretty girl for a translator. You his decoration?" Before she could reply, Han Min's voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Say that again." The room went still. The Russian laughed nervously. "Just a compliment." But Han Min was already on his feet, calm but deadly. He grabbed the man by the collar and whispered something Nissa couldn't hear, then slammed his head into the table. The crack echoed like thunder. Nissa gasped. The other men froze. Han Min straightened his jacket, his expression cool as ice. "Anyone else want to comment on my employee?" No one did. The rest of the meeting continued in uneasy silence. And for the first time, Nissa understood that his cruelty wasn't just arrogance. It was armor, a language of survival in a world built on blood. When they finally left, she couldn't stay silent. "You didn't have to do that. He disrespected you. I can handle words. And I handle men who forget their place," he said flatly. She shook her head. "You're impossible. And you're still here." That night, he dropped her off at her apartment again. This time, he didn't order her out immediately. Instead, he just sat there, watching the city lights flicker across her face. "You did well today," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." "What did you expect? For me to break?" "I don't break," she whispered. He smiled, not cruelly this time, but almost softly. "We'll see." As she reached for the door, he spoke again. "Nissa." She turned, her eyes meeting his. "In this world, loyalty is currency. Don't spend it on the wrong people." "And which are you?" she asked. "The right or the wrong one?" His gaze lingered, unreadable, dark. "Both." The door shut softly behind her, but his words stayed with her. That night, Nissa couldn't shake the image of him, the ruthless man who could break bones with one hand, but still defend her in a heartbeat. Something about him terrified her. Something about him intrigued her even more, and sleep finally pulled her under. One thought echoed in her mind like a warning she refused to hear. "You're already in too deep, Nissa." Days blurred into weeks. What started as a forced job had become a storm Nissa couldn't escape. Every morning, she rode the elevator to the top floor of Hong Corporation, determined to treat her work like any other. But every evening, she left more tangled in Han Min's world than before. He was impossible. One moment, he was cold as stone, barking orders like a general. The next, he'd watch her from across the room with an intensity that made her pulse stumble. The staff avoided him. Everyone feared him. But Nissa, she challenged him. One afternoon, she burst into his office, slamming a file on his desk. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice tight with urgency. He looked up slowly, his pen pausing mid-signature. "You storm into my office to tell me how to run my business? You're about to sign a deal with a company that's been flagged internationally. Their funds are dirty." A smirk curved his lips. "You think I don't know that?" Her eyes widened. "Then why do it?" He stood, closing the space between them. His voice dropped low and deliberate. "Because sometimes you shake hands with the devil to know where he hides. That's not business, Hanj. That's suicide." He tilted his head, studying her. "You care." "I care about staying alive," she snapped. "And you dragging me into this could get us both killed." Something in his gaze softened just for a second, so brief she almost doubted it. "Then you should leave and let me destroy myself." Silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Then, to her surprise, he laughed quietly, a sound she'd never heard from him before. "You're either the bravest woman I've met, or the most foolish." "Maybe both," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. That night, the city was alive with rain, silver streaks dancing across the glass walls of his penthouse office. They were still working late, documents scattered everywhere, the tension thicker than smoke. Min poured himself a drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. "You miss home?" he asked suddenly, catching her completely off guard. She blinked. "Sometimes. But Lagos was never easy. Coming here was supposed to mean peace." "And now you work for a criminal," he said dryly, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You said it, not me." He smiled faintly. "You're the only one who talks to me like that. Maybe no one else dares." Their eyes met, and in that silent second, the world outside disappeared. The rain, the city lights, the hum of soul, all faded into the slow burn of something neither of them wanted to name. "You should go home," he murmured, his voice rough around the edges. "Before I forget who you are." But she didn't move. "Who am I?" "Trouble," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "Beautiful, dangerous trouble." Her breath hitched. She should have walked away, but something about the way he said it, like a confession he hadn't meant to let slip, rooted her in place. For a fleeting moment, the mafia boss and the girl from Lagos stood inches apart, and all their carefully constructed walls trembled. Then the door burst open. A guard rushed in, breathless. "Boss, the shipment's been hit. 2 men down." Min's expression hardened instantly, all traces of warmth gone. He grabbed his jacket, already moving toward the door. "Get the cars ready." He turned to Nissa. "Stay here." But she followed him anyway. "I'm not hiding while you walk into danger. This isn't your fight. It became mine the moment you dragged me into your world." He hesitated, then cursed under his breath. "Fine. Stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to." They reached the docks within minutes. The air reeked of salt and gunpowder. Men shouted, lights flickered, and smoke coiled above burning crates. Nissa's heart pounded as she crouched behind a stack of containers, watching Min stride into the chaos like he was born in it. He moved with deadly precision, giving commands, returning fire, unflinching even as bullets tore through the night. When one of his men fell, she couldn't stay still. She crawled forward, pressing her hand against the wound, her training from a first aid course kicking in. "He's losing blood fast," she yelled. Min turned, surprise flashing across his face before he ran to cover her. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your man." He fired another round, then grabbed her wrist, pulling her back behind the containers. "When I say stay back, you stay back. You want me to watch people die? You'll die, too," he shouted, his voice raw with a mixture of anger and fear. She met his eyes, and in them, for the first time, she saw genuine fear not for himself, but for her. A stray bullet ricocheted off a nearby container, grazing his arm. She gasped, instinctively reaching out to touch the wound. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," she said, pressing her scarf against the wound to stop the bleeding. Their faces were inches apart again, close enough to feel the tremor of each other's breath, the chaos raging around them fading into a blur. "Why do you care so much?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the gunfire. "Because underneath all that arrogance and cruelty," she said, her voice trembling, "I think there's still a man who doesn't want to be alone." He froze, his eyes searching hers. Then something broke behind his eyes, something fragile and human. For a heartbeat, it wasn't the mafia boss and his translator. It was just 2 souls standing on the edge of a fire they couldn't put out. Then the sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. "Police!" Min swore under his breath, pulling her toward the car. They drove off into the shadows, the sirens fading behind them. Back at his mansion, silence filled the air. She cleaned the wound on his arm while he watched her, uncharacteristically quiet. "You should hate me," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Most people do." "You make it easy to," she replied, meeting his gaze. He smiled faintly. "And yet you stayed." "Maybe I'm foolish," she said softly. Or maybe I see something in you that you don't. He reached for her hand, hesitant, almost unsure. You're fire, Nissa, and I'm the one stupid enough to stand too close. She didn't pull away. Then maybe it's time you learned to stop burning everything that touches you. The words lingered between them like a promise and a threat all at once. And somewhere deep down, both of them knew that whatever this was, it had already crossed the line, because fire doesn't love. It consumes. Seoul never slept. But that night, the city felt like it was holding its breath. Nissa stood on the balcony of Han Min's penthouse, the wind sweeping through her braids, her mind racing with everything that had happened at the docks. Han Min was downstairs, arguing with someone over the phone. His voice was low, clipped, dangerous. She could barely make out the words, but she didn't need to. She already knew. The attack wasn't random. Someone inside his organization had betrayed him. When he finally came upstairs, his shirt still blood-stained and his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger, he stopped when he saw her standing on the balcony. You should rest. You won't, so I won't. I don't have that luxury. Then neither do I. He stared at her for a long moment before looking away, his voice noticeably quieter than before. You shouldn't have been there tonight. You'd be dead if I wasn't. He said nothing more, but his silence spoke louder than words ever could. Days passed in an uneasy calm. Rumors spread like wildfire throughout the underworld. Whispers of a mole, of the police closing in, of alliances fracturing. Through it all, Nissa stayed. Not because she trusted him. She didn't. But because she couldn't walk away from someone who'd built his empire out of scars and shadows. Then came the night everything changed. She was in his office, going over documents for an upcoming meeting in Busan, when she noticed something strange, a transfer log, a series of coded payments that didn't match any of his legitimate businesses. It was clean, too clean. Her stomach twisted into a knot. The codes traced back to her bank account. Before she could even process it, the door slammed open. Han Min stormed in, flanked by two of his men. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with fury. You've been busy, haven't you? What are you talking about? He tossed a folder onto the desk. Photos, bank statements, surveillance stills. Her name was all over them. The police intercepted these an hour ago. You've been feeding them information about my shipments. That's not true, she protested, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Then how do you explain this? I don't know, she insisted desperately. Someone's framing me. Convenient, he cut in coldly. You show up out of nowhere. You speak every language my enemies use. You question my decisions, and then my operation is compromised. Han Min, you know me, do I? The air between them crackled with electricity, charged with betrayal, anger, and something far worse, heartbreak. If I wanted to destroy you, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I wouldn't still be standing here. He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to his men. Take her to the safe house. Don't let her out until I say so. You can't just do this, she barked, her voice rising with desperation. The guards grabbed her arms as she struggled, fury and disbelief twisting inside her. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made, he said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion, was trusting you. The safe house was a concrete cage on the edge of Seoul. No windows, one locked door, and silence thick enough to choke on. Nissa paced the floor, replaying everything in her head. Someone had set her up, and she could guess who. Menu, Han Min's right-hand man. He'd always hated her, the foreign girl who dared to talk back, who dared to soften his boss. Hours turned into days. Her only visitor was a guard who brought food and said nothing. Then one night she heard voices outside. Gunfire. The door burst open. Han Min staggered in, bleeding from his side. You were right, he said, his voice raw with pain and regret. It was Menu. He sold us out to the Russians. I shouldn't have doubted you. Before she could respond, he collapsed. No, 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 she whispered, catching him as he fell. Blood soaked through her hands. She tore her scarf, pressing it to the wound, trying to staunch the flow of blood. "Stay with me, Hanj. You should have left," he murmured weakly, his eyes glazed over with pain. "You were never meant to be a part of this world." "Too late," she said, tears blurring her vision. "I'm already in it." He gave a faint, painful smile. "You're too strong for me, Nissa. I tried to push you away, but you stayed. Why? Because someone had to remind you that you're still human." For a moment, his hand found hers, trembling warm. "You're fire," he whispered, "and I think I finally learned how to stop burning." She leaned close, her forehead resting against his. "Then don't you dare die on me now." Hours later, the police arrived, drawn by the chaos Menu had unleashed. The building was surrounded, sirens echoing through the night. Nissa helped Hanj Min to his feet. "We have to go. It's too late. They'll shoot on sight." "Then let me get you out, please." But he shook his head, his eyes filled with a weary resignation. "If I run, this never ends. My men will keep fighting. Seoul will drown in blood. It has to stop with me. Don't do this." He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded passport and a plane ticket. "There's a flight to Lagos at dawn. You're free now. Take it." "You think I can just walk away? You have to." "No," she said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not leaving you to die for sins you didn't commit." He smiled faintly. "You said I wasn't human anymore. Maybe this is how I prove you wrong." Then he kissed her rough, desperate, final. "Go." She hesitated, torn between her loyalty to him and her own survival. Then the door burst open, gunfire slicing the air. Hanj Min shoved her behind him, returning fire until the clip ran dry. The last thing she saw before the smoke swallowed everything was him standing tall, defiant, a king facing his end. The news hit the stands the next morning. Mafia leader Hanj Min killed in police raid, international links exposed. Nissa watched from a cafe near Incheon Airport, numbly clutching the plane ticket he'd given her. She could leave, forget, start over. But instead, she took a pen and scribbled something on the back of the ticket. "Fire doesn't die. It becomes light." She tucked it into her passport, stood up, and walked toward the terminal, not away from her past, but toward the future he'd bought her with his life. Months later, back in Lagos, Nissa stood before a university lecture hall, speaking about cultural resilience and human duality. Her students listened intently, unaware that the fire in her words came from the ashes of a love forged in the heart of Seoul's dark underworld. From a man who had once set the world ablaze and then had the audacity to love her amidst the ruins. Gazing out at the multitude of young faces before her, she offered a gentle smile. "Sometimes," she murmured, "strength isn't about battling the world head-on. It's about enduring what it takes from you and still choosing to embrace life." Outside, a subtle aroma of rain drifted on the wind, and for the briefest moment, she could have sworn she heard his voice. "Your fire, Nissa." And she smiled because she was, and because she always would be. 2 years had gone by. Nissa had become a rising star in the academic world, her lectures on resilience and the importance of cultural heritage attracting attention from well beyond the city limits of Lagos. She had painstakingly rebuilt her life from the wreckage left by Seoul's chaos. And yet, a part of her was still inextricably linked to the man who had altered the course of everything. One rainy evening, she came back to her apartment after giving a lecture, the street glistening with the reflections of neon signs. She casually tossed her bag onto the sofa and then noticed a small envelope sitting on her desk. There was no return address on it. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph was instantly recognizable. It was Jen, looking older, wearing a custom-tailored suit, standing on a balcony with a view of a city that was definitely not Seoul. It was somewhere in Europe. His eyes, still sharp and intense, seemed to cut through time and distance. The paper held only a few words, written in his distinct, precise handwriting. "Fire never dies. It waits." Nissa's heart began to pound in her chest. She gasped for air. Countless questions flooded her mind. How had he managed to survive? And why now, after all this time? Was this a warning, a message of some kind, or a second chance at something? She clutched the photo tightly to her chest, feeling the faint, comforting warmth of a distant memory. He had allowed her to live, he had given her the gift of freedom, but even from a great distance, he had made sure that she still carried the spark of their connection. A small smile played across her lips. "I'll find you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Boy, steady, heart fierce. The rain started to come down harder, washing the streets in a shimmering silver light. Somewhere across the world, he was waiting, and for the first time since that fateful night in Seoul, Nissa felt that familiar thrill of the unknown, the excitement of a fire that could never be fully controlled or extinguished. Because some flames, no matter how far apart they may be, will always find their way back to each other.